The call I made at 2:47 in the morning was supposed to go to a taxi service. I stared at the payphone mounted to the cinder block wall of the 14th Precinct holding area, my right hand wrapped in gauze that smelled faintly of antiseptic and regret, and realized I didn't know a single cab company's phone number from memory. Everything I knew was in my phone. My phone was currently in an evidence bag behind the front desk, because the arresting officer had watched me sprint out of a burning building at midnight and decided that required further conversation. I knew exactly 3 phone numbers by heart. My mother's landline in Tucson, the Chinese takeout place 2 blocks from my apartment that I ordered from so frequently the number was essentially muscle memory, and the direct line to Silas Crow's office. I called the office line because it was the only professional number I had memorized. I told myself it would route to a voicemail. I could leave a message, figure something out in the morning, and handle this the way I handled everything, quietly, without involving anyone who didn't need to be involved. He picked up on the second ring. Crow. He wasn't supposed to be there. It was nearly 3 in the morning. His voice was flat, alert, stripped of the particular brand of carefully calibrated courtesy he used in board meetings. This was a different voice. I had never heard this voice before. I had worked for Silas Crow for 3 years, 2 months, and 11 days. I had sat in the accounting department on the 12th floor of Crow Holdings, auditing internal ledgers, reconciling subsidiary accounts, flagging discrepancies in quarterly reports. I was the person who caught the $847 error in the Denver property tax filing. I was the person who reorganized the digital filing system for offshore trust documentation in a way that saved the firm approximately 40 hours per year in retrieval time. I was, in the parlance of corporate America, a very good auditor. I was also, by every measurable metric, completely invisible. Silas Crow had spoken to me directly a total of 9 times in 3 years. I had counted. "This is Faye Aldridge," I said, because I genuinely was not certain he would know who I was. "From the Internal Audit Division. There's been a situation." There was a pause, short, precise. "What kind of situation, Ms. Aldridge?" "The kind that involves the 14th Precinct and a fire investigator who has a lot of questions I'm not currently at liberty to answer." Another pause, longer this time. I heard the sound of a chair shifting, the soft thud of something heavy being set down on a desk. "Are you hurt?" It was not the question I expected. I expected logistics, lawyers, liability, exposure. Not that. "My hand," I said. "I cut it going through a doorframe in the dark. It's not serious." "I'll be there in 20 minutes, he hung up. He was there in 18. I had been sitting in a plastic chair in the holding area, watching the fluorescent light above me flicker in an irregular rhythm that I was fairly certain was a fire code violation, when the desk sergeant appeared and told me someone had posted my bail. The number, $4,000 cash, landed somewhere in my chest with a weight I wasn't prepared for. I had been calculating what it would cost me, how long I'd be draining my emergency fund. Silas Crow had apparently calculated it in the time it took his driver to get downtown. He was standing by the front desk when I walked out, not sitting. Standing, with the particular stillness that I had noticed across 9 brief conversations and 3 years of watching him move through conference rooms. He wore a dark wool overcoat over what looked like clothes he'd been wearing all evening. Charcoal trousers, a black shirt with the collar unbuttoned. His hair was slightly disheveled in a way that suggested he'd driven with the window down. His eyes, when they landed on me, did a very quick and very thorough inventory. "Ms. Aldridge," he said. "Mr. Crow," I said. He looked at my right hand, wrapped in the precinct's gauze. He looked at the shoulder of my jacket, where a ragged tear in the fabric had caught on a metal door frame in the dark. He looked at my face, which I could feel was probably not great. I had been in a building that was actively on fire. I looked like it. "Can we leave?" I asked. "The coffee here is an ethical violation." Something shifted in his expression. Not quite a smile, more like the ghost of one. "Car's outside," he said. His driver, a broad, quiet man named Holt, who I recognized from the company parking structure, kept his eyes firmly on the road during the ride uptown. The partition between the front and back seats was up. I sat against the door on my side, watching the Manhattan streets slide past in the rain. It was the particular quiet of 3 a.m., when the city was reduced to its bones. Delivery trucks, the occasional cab, the orange glow of a bodega still doing business. "Talk," Silas said. He wasn't looking at me. He was watching the same streets, the same rain. I had been auditing Crow Holdings' internal accounts for 3 years. For the first 2.5 of those years, the books were clean, meticulously clean, in a way that, if you looked at it from a certain angle, was almost artistic. Money moved through real estate acquisitions, commercial property management, freight logistics subsidiaries, and charitable endowment vehicles in patterns that were technically legal and practically invisible. I understood, in the way you understand something you have never been explicitly told, what Crow Holdings was. I did my job. I reconciled what I was given. I did not look behind the curtains I wasn't supposed to open. Then, 7 months ago, I started finding things that didn't fit. "There's a man named Dalton Rice," I said, "your CFO." Silas turned his head toward me for the first time in the car. His expression didn't change exactly, but the quality of his attention did. "I'm aware of who Dalton is," he said. "For approximately 22 months, Dalton has been systematically siphoning operating revenue from your freight logistics subsidiaries into a series of shell accounts registered in Delaware and Wyoming." I kept my voice even. I had rehearsed this in my head for weeks. The amounts are small enough individually to fall under internal review thresholds, between $30,000 and $90,000 per transfer, but the aggregate over 22 months is approximately $4.3 million. The silence in the car changed texture. "That's not the part that matters," I continued. "The part that matters is what he's been doing with the money. He hasn't kept it. He's been funding a separate entity he created 8 months ago, which has been retaining a federal defense attorney. Dalton has been building himself an immunity package. He's planning to approach the DOJ, Mr. Crow. He's going to offer to testify against Crow Holdings in exchange for a deal. He has a meeting with a contact at the U.S. Attorney's office, scheduled for tomorrow morning at 9. I watched Silas's face in the passing streetlights. He had gone completely still. The kind of stillness I associated with men who have learned that sudden movement is something you only do when you intend to break something. "How do you know all of this?" he said. His voice was very quiet. "I'm your auditor," I said. "I know where every dollar in this company goes. When dollars started going places I couldn't account for, I followed them. It took me 4 months to build the full picture. The documents I retrieved from the off-site storage facility tonight, before it caught fire, which I did not cause, for the record, are the last piece, physical printouts of the communication logs between Dalton and his legal team. Emails. A complete timeline. You went into a burning building to get documents," Silas said. "The building wasn't on fire when I went in," I said. "The fire started while I was inside. I believe Dalton's people said it. Someone told them I'd been accessing records they were supposed to have already destroyed. I got out. I kept the documents." I paused. "They're in my jacket lining. The officers at the precinct didn't find them because they weren't looking for anything that thin." Silas stared at me for a long moment. In the low light, his expression was unreadable, in the way that expensive things often are. Complexity hidden behind a surface that gives nothing away. "Holt," he said, raising his voice just slightly. "We're not going to her address. Take us to the building." Holt changed lanes without a word. His office at the top of the Crow Tower was different at night. The floor-to-ceiling glass overlooking the Hudson was all dark water and distant lights, the kind of view that looked manufactured. He turned on only the desk lamp, which pooled warm amber across the leather surface and left the rest of the room in shadow. He poured 2 glasses of bourbon from a crystal decanter, without asking, and set one in front of me on the edge of the desk. I took it and drank it because my hand was starting to throb, and the adrenaline was finally metabolizing into something that felt uncomfortably close to fear. He sat behind his desk. I stood across from it because I had not been invited to sit, and old habits are made of iron. "Show me," he said. I reached into the lining of my jacket and produced a folded sheaf of papers, slightly smoke-scented but intact. I spread them on the desk between us. I walked him through everything: the shell companies, the routing structure, the payment logs to the defense attorney, the email thread in which Dalton outlined, in language that tried very hard to sound innocuous and failed, his plan to use Silas as a ladder out of a situation entirely of Dalton's own making. Silas read everything twice. He did not interrupt. He did not ask me to slow down or repeat myself. He read the way someone reads when they are constructing something in their mind, not just absorbing information. When he finished, he leaned back in his chair and looked at me. "He gets to the U.S. Attorney's office tomorrow morning," Silas said, "and none of this matters." "He won't get there," I said. Silas raised one eyebrow, just one. "I spent 3 days last week building a parallel IRS submission package," I said, "using the same documentation I've compiled on Dalton, structured as a whistleblower complaint. The complaint outlines the embezzlement from the freight subsidiaries in full, with routing details, transfer logs, and the shell company registrations in Delaware and Wyoming, all filed under Dalton's name as the responsible party. The moment it's submitted, it triggers an automatic asset freeze on the accounts he's been building. His legal defense fund disappears. His attorney's retainer bounces, and the federal contact he's meeting tomorrow morning receives a copy of the complaint automatically, because I added that specific distribution trigger to the filing." The amber light caught the crystal of his bourbon glass. "When the U.S. Attorney receives a whistleblower complaint naming Dalton as the subject of a tax fraud and embezzlement scheme," I continued, "the 9 o'clock meeting becomes a federal interview, not a deal negotiation. Dalton walks in thinking he's offering information and discovers he's the target. There is no immunity for a man who's already been reported." Silas was quiet for a long time. Outside, the river moved in the dark. "You built all of this," he said finally, "while sitting in your office, while filing the quarterly reconciliations, while catching the tax error in Denver." The Denver error was genuine. I don't confuse my actual job with the other thing. The other thing. He stood from his desk and walked around it, and I found that I did not step back, which was interesting information about myself. He stopped an arm's length away and looked at me the way I was not accustomed to being looked at, like something worth examining closely. "You ran a 7-month covert financial investigation, inside my company, on your lunch breaks. And some evenings, the routing analysis was detailed. You have been sitting in a cubicle on the 12th floor. It's a good cubicle, the window faces east." Something restructured itself in his expression then. He reached out slowly and tucked a strand of hair back from my face, the one that had come loose in the chaos and was hanging against my cheekbone. His fingers barely grazed my skin. It was, objectively, an insignificant gesture. My pulse disagreed. "File it," he said. His voice had gone quiet. "Not cold, something else, right now from here." I sat down at his desk, his actual desk, the one with the encrypted system, and filed the IRS complaint at 4:12 in the morning. The confirmation landed in my secondary email with a sterile automated timestamp. Somewhere across the city, Dalton Rice's asset accounts were already being flagged by algorithms that had no opinion about any of it. I had always appreciated that about automated systems. They did not hesitate. They did not reconsider. They simply executed. I looked up. Silas was standing at the window watching the lights on the river. "He'll know someone did this deliberately," I said. "By the time he figures out who," Silas said, "he'll be having that conversation with a federal public defender." He turned from the window. "You're not going back to the 12th floor, Sparrow." The nickname landed without warning, quiet, specific, like he'd been holding it somewhere and finally decided to set it down between us. "That's not my name," I said. "It is now." He said it like it was already true, which, I was beginning to understand, was how he said most things. "You're done reconciling subsidiary accounts. As of this morning, you work in here. With me, you see everything. You already know what to do with it." I looked at him, the man who had spoken to me directly 9 times in 3 years, the man who had driven to a police precinct at 3 a.m. and not asked a single logistical question before asking if I was hurt. "I'll need a decent chair," I said. "The one at my current desk has had a broken wheel for 11 months. Facilities closed the ticket twice." The corner of his mouth moved, a real one this time. 4 options on your desk by 8. Dalton Rice was taken into federal custody at 9:23. The next morning, 12 minutes into what he had believed was a productive meeting. The asset freeze had hit before he'd finished his first cup of coffee in the waiting area. His attorney withdrew by noon. By mid-afternoon, 2 of Dalton's lieutenants in the freight subsidiary had already contacted Crow Holdings' legal department, offering cooperation in exchange for favorable treatment, the particular brand of loyalty that evaporates the moment the math changes. I was in Silas's office when Holt delivered the news. I was working through the freight subsidiary accounts, rebuilding the internal structure that Dalton had quietly corrupted over 22 months. I had found 4 additional vulnerabilities before lunch. I had flagged them all in a clean spreadsheet and left it on Silas's desk without comment. He read it when he came back. He didn't say anything for a moment. Then he set it down and looked at me across the room with something in his expression that I didn't have a precise name for yet. Something that looked like the specific respect a person reserves for things that have genuinely surprised them. "Dalton's done," he said. "Yes," I said. "How does it feel?" I considered the question honestly. My hand still ached under the fresh bandage. My jacket was ruined. I had slept 40 minutes on the executive suite couch and was running on Silas's very good French press coffee, and the particular focus that comes from knowing something is finally correct. The spreadsheet in front of me was clean, the columns aligned. The discrepancies had been found and named and were in the process of being permanently corrected. There was a satisfaction to that which I had never quite found a way to explain to anyone who didn't feel it the same way. "Accurate," I said. "It feels accurate." He looked at me for a moment. Then he picked up his coffee mug and tilted it slightly in my direction. Not quite a toast, but something in that territory. "Welcome to the table, Sparrow," he said. I looked at the spreadsheet. I looked at him. I thought about 9 conversations in 3 years, and the particular quality of a voice that answers the phone at 3 a.m. and immediately asks if you're hurt before asking anything else at all. "I'm going to need full access to the offshore trust documentation," I said. "End of day," he said. "And the chair." 4 options, 8 a.m. This time the smile was complete. It changed his whole face in a way I filed away without meaning to. I turned back to my work. Outside the floor-to-ceiling windows, the city moved through its afternoon routines, entirely unaware that the internal architecture of one of its most powerful financial empires had just been quietly, precisely, and permanently restructured. Not with threats, not with leverage applied in dark rooms, but with a spreadsheet, a smoke-stained jacket lining, and a woman who had been overlooked long enough to see absolutely everything. That's the thing about being invisible. People leave doors unlocked when they don't think anyone's watching. They say things in hallways they'd never say in boardrooms. They skip the security protocols on systems they assume no one else understands. And when you've been sitting in the same quiet corner for 3 years, doing work that makes everyone else's lives easier without once being thanked for it, you start to see the whole board. Every piece, every weakness, every play someone thinks they're hiding. I had seen everything. I had written all of it down. And when it mattered, I used it. Some people take a room by walking in loud. I've always found it more efficient to already be there, to have already read everything on the table, and to simply wait for someone to finally ask the right question. Silas Crow asked at 2:47 in the morning, in a holding cell phone call he probably still doesn't entirely understand. I answered, and neither of us has been quite the same since.